Welcome. Take a slow breath, settle in, and let yourself drift far back across the centuries to the creaking wooden bones of an old sailing ship. Tonight, we leave behind the comforts of the present and step into the heavy, salt-laced air of the 1600s. Our ship floats gently upon the open sea, a pirate ship, to be precise. But not the glamorous kind of pirates found in storybooks or movies. Not tonight. Tonight, we're going below deck. This is not the tale of swashbuckling adventure or golden treasures. No, this is the slower, quieter, stranger truth, the kind of truth you don't hear when tales are told loudly around fires. This is the version spoken in whispers over salted pork and stale biscuit, shared beneath hammocks in the damp dark. This is the reality that hides in the groans of timber and the rustle of ropes overhead. In this journey, we'll explore the stillness and struggle of pirate life. We'll learn the rhythms of the sea-bound days, the hidden figures who shaped this world, the mysteries that surrounded their vanished coves, and finally, we'll all turn our gaze to the distant Elysthos, who sent ships to chase or sponsor the very pirates they claimed to loathe. Let the soft creaking of wood lull you, the slow rhythm of the waves, and let the distant history of piracy drift over you like sea mist, quiet and strange, slowly revealing the layered truths of life at sea. Imagine yourself deep in the belly of the ship. The air is close here, not quite foul, not quite fresh, just heavy. The low ceiling presses down, just above your head. Your feet press against damp wooden planks. Every creak and groan of the ship travels through your bones. It smells of old rope, of drying seawater, of things left too long in dark corners. You are the ship's cook, not by choice, perhaps, but by survival. Each day begins in a half-darkness. A smoky lantern sways overhead, slinging dim orange light across barrels, sacks, and the shape of your own shadow. You wake not to a rooster's crow, but to the sluggish rhythm of feet above, and the slosh of water against the hull. The light is never strong. There is no breeze, just the breath of the ship, steady and enclosed. You sleep in a hammock slung too close to the barrels. Food stores are guarded more carefully than gold. Dried beans, salted fish, wormy biscuit, smoked meat, dried peas if you're lucky. If you're really lucky, maybe a bit of hard cheese not yet crawling. There is no fresh produce, no sweet fruit, only what lasts and what can be kept dry. The biscuit is so hard it must be soaked before chewing. Your galley is little more than an iron box of heat. The ship's stove, known as the caboose, is a fire hazard wrapped in iron. On calm days, you manage a hot gruel or perhaps a stew of boiled salt pork. On rougher seas, you serve cold scraps because lighting a fire on a tossing wooden ship is a fool's errand. The pot rattles and clangs with every tilt of the waves. And when the fire goes out, it stays out until weather permits. Rats are not your enemy. They are your competition. They skitter underfoot, bold and fast. They chew through bags, leave their droppings near the biscuit tins, and sometimes they fall asleep right in the sacks of grain. You swat at them with a spoon, but they return. Always. They live in the walls, in the hold, in the seams of the ship itself. You hear them at night, chewing and scratching. Each meal is a gamble. How long will the food last? How spoiled is it already? How do you make something edible without fresh water? You become skilled at shaving mold, cutting around rot, scraping weevils out of flour, and saying little of it. Your nose adjusts to smells you once couldn't bear. Your stomach learns what it must tolerate. There are rules, spoken and unspoken. The quartermaster may eat first, or the captain. It depends on the ship. On some days, they let you slip the best cut to a sick crewman. On others, The hungry simply take what they can. There is no formal dining. Meals are eaten, sitting on crates, squatting in corners, with hands, with knives, with fingers wiped on sleeves. Meal times are brief, often interrupted by unexpected shouts or sudden winds that can change everything. A shout from the deck, the sighting of another ship, or a sudden gust of wind can end supper in an instant. Discipline on board is loose but fierce when needed. Arguments over rations spark quicker than gunpowder. You learn to keep your head down, to speak softly, to be useful. A good cook survives, even when better fighters are left behind. You stay out of fights, but you hear them. You feel the tension when someone takes more than their share. And when punishments come, they are swift and public. Lashings, withholding of food, or worse, being set adrift. The days are slow. The work is constant. You boil, sort, chop, and clean. The knife you use is dull. The pot never scrubs clean. Your fingers smell of fish and brine. Your apron is stiff with dried broth. Your hands are always wet, your skin dry and cracking with salt. Oil from tinned meats leaves a film on your fingertips. Smoke clings to your sleeves, and the ache in your back never leaves. And yet, in this dark, low-ceilinged space, you learn the language of the ship. You hear the murmurs of mutiny before they rise. You listen as men plan routes, question loyalties, whisper about gold. You notice who sleeps lightly, who dreams aloud, who sharpens blades too often. You overhear secrets traded for favors, threats whispered in passing, even quiet prayers in languages you don't speak. In a way, you become the ear of the vessel. You feed the crew, yes, but you also know them. Who jokes too loudly? Who stays silent too long? Who counts coins in their sleep? Who avoids the others? And who always lingers after meals? Your position is humble, but your insight is wide. You know which crewmen have short tempers, which ones steal, and which ones will take risks. You know who's afraid of the dark, who misses home, who will snap in the next storm. And when the ship rocks harder, when a chase begins or a storm brews, you steady yourself. You prepare the dry goods, you lash down the barrels, you wait, you survive. You've learned which crates shift, where the drips fall, how to keep the flame alive just long enough. You brace yourself by instinct. You know when to hold the pot and when to let it crash. Life below deck is not a tale of action. It is a long, slow endurance, a test of patience, tolerance, and stomach. It is the art of doing much with little, of staying unnoticed, of keeping the hunger at bay. It is life measured not in victories, but in meals cooked, spoiled, food avoided, fires lit and extinguished, and mouths fed without complaint. So, as the ship gently sways tonight, let yourself drift among the shadows of salted meat and flickering lanterns and the hush of the sea outside. Life here is not glorious, but it is real, and it goes on, day by day, in the rhythm of rocking wood and quiet footsteps overhead. Now, let us rise slowly from the dim, smoky galley, up through the creaking timbers, past the whispering sails and sun-cracked deckboards, and into a different kind of story. One not buried in barrels and biscuits, but carried in breath and blood, fire and defiance. A story less about place and more about spirit. This is the story of Anne Bonny. Her name floats like mist over the faded ink of old sea charts. She appears at the edge of records, where history meets myth. But Anne Bonny was no phantom. Her life, as much as we can trace it, cut through the conventions of her time like a ship through storm-lashed waves. Anne was not meant to exist in the form she chose, not as a woman with breeches at her waist, pistols at her hip, and the brine of rebellion in her lungs. Not as a daughter who turned away from safety, choosing the chaos of cannon smoke and shifting loyalties. She was born around the year 1700, possibly in Ireland, possibly in Charleston, Carolina. The documents disagree and the stories conflict. But what echoes clearly is that Anne's very beginning was entangled in scandal. She was the child of a lawyer and his maiden affair, hidden behind disguises and whispered relocations. For a time, she was passed off as a boy, dressed to deflect gossip. Eventually, her family fled to the New World, to Carolina, to land thick with mosquitoes and ambition, where fortunes grew as fast as tempers, and everything, especially people, could be bought or sold. Anne was raised among property owners, sugar traders, and a brittle kind of respectability, but she did not take easily to roles that were assigned. Her temper, reportedly, was fierce. Her independence even fierce. Legends claim she once beat a servant boy near to death, that she argued with her father over every inch of her life, that she wielded a blade before she ever touched embroidery. Whether these are facts or myths, they tell us how she was remembered not as polite, but powerful. She married a pirate, or at least a man who aimed to be one. James Bonny. Their union did not bring her security. Instead, it tore her from her inheritance and sent her sailing to Nassau in the Bahamas, a pirate stronghold of the time. Nassau was a strange kind of place, half anarchy, half fraternity, a heaven for the unwanted, for those with nowhere else to go, and on, it seems, belonged there. James Bonny, disappointed, he turned informer, selling out fellow pirates for pardon and profit, and, restless and unimpressed, sought other company. And there she found Calico, Jack Rackham, a pirate more stylish than skilled, but quick-witted, persuasive, and bold. He wore bright clothes, laughed too loud, and led with flair. Anne fell in with him, not behind him. Some say she boarded his ship disguised as a man. Others say her presence as a woman was no secret. Regardless, she proved her place, not by birthright or courtesy, but by action, and fought. She raided, she swore and drank. She slept among weapons and lived without apology. Hers was a presence that disrupted and demanded respect. She was no token. She was a crew member, and a feared one at that. She was not alone. Mary Red, another woman in disguise, sailed alongside her. The two became legendary in part because they were anomalies, but also because they matched their male counterparts in fury. Their voices rose in the roar of battle. Their pistols were loaded, their blades were not props. When danger came, Anne did not hide. She ran toward it. In 1720, the end arrived. Calico Jack's ship, the Revenge, was caught off guard by a sloop sent from Jamaica. Many of the crew were drunk, celebrating perhaps, or simply exhausted. When the attack came, they fought, but not Anne, not Mary. The two women fought until they could no longer. It's said they stood on the deck, shouting for their crewmates to wake and fight, firing pistols into the dark while the men cowered below. They were captured, shackled, taken to trial. The verdict was swift: guilty of piracy. The sentence: death by hanging. But an ever-tactical claimed pregnancy, pleading her belly, as the term went. Execution delayed. Mary Read did the same. Mary died in prison. Anne Bonny did not. What happened next is uncertain. Some say her father intervened, quietly paid for her release, and brought her home. Others believe she escaped, that she changed her name, perhaps married again, or returned to sea under new colors. There is no marked grave, no final document. She fades from the record, but not from memory. What remains is a shape, the impression of someone who lived with fury and freedom in equal measure. A woman who dressed in defiance, loved without permission, and fought for her place on a deck that was never meant to hold her. She broke rules not to be remembered, but because she refused to bend. So tonight, as you lie still and the hush of the night surrounds you like fog on the open sea. Imagine her, red hair wild in the wind, boots planted firmly, weapons drawn, eyes sharp with refusal. Anne Bonny, not a queen, not a myth, but something far rarer. A woman who lived entirely on her own terms. Drift there a while, to the decks of ships long vanished, to the stories hidden in silence, and to the waves that still whisper her name. Now, let us gently step away from the musty grottos and storm-battered piers, where pirates once ducked into shadow and legend. We leave behind the reek of tar and bilge, of blood-slicked decks, and hastily buried coin. The creak of aging hulls fades, and instead, we drift into another world entirely. A world not marked by scarcity and desperation, but by opulence, routine, and the heavy perfume of power. Not a schooner cracking beneath salt and wind, but a veranda shaded with linen and cooled by soft-spoken servants bearing chilled wine. Welcome to the realm of the colonial elite, a rarefied circle of command, where ink sealed fates, where powdered wigs cloaked intentions. Conquest happened right from a comfy mahogany chair. This world has no howling winds or clashing swords. Here, we find refinement draped over ambition, like lace over steel. No Bodhi songs, no roaring threats, only the soothing trill of string quartets in shaded drawing rooms, the quiet scratch of pen to parchment, and the murmur of calculated pleasantries exchanged over clinking porcelain cups. These salons were not silent, but their noise was ordered. Intentional, carefully layered, like the Rococo wallpaper imported from Paris. Stepping into a colonial governor's home, King Pondicherry, Cape Town, or even Batavia, the iron gate swings open without sound, and the air carries the scent of jasmine and oiled teakwood. Polished stone corridors stretch beneath stained glass windows, casting pastel hues on the floor. Every surface glimmers. A servant in crisp livery waits silently beside a standing clock, ticking with mechanical precision. The faint aroma of citrus oil, beeswax, tobacco smoke, and colonial ambition clings to the air. Somewhere deeper within the house, a heart plays. The governor sits at his writing desk, adjusting allocations for sugar shipments and troop deployments with the same ease one might plan an afternoon garden party. His wig is curled and powdered, his waistcoat tightly embroidered, his ringed hand holding a feather quill dipped in imported ink. His wife, an expert in matters both social and strategic, oversees the guest list for the upcoming banquet. Reputation, precedence, skin tone, and allegiance all weighed with care. Their children, instructed by multilingual tutors, recite Virgil in Latin while copying royal decrees in neat, careful script. Each aspect of this life is rehearsed, curated, and sealed with decorum. The rhythm of their days is ceremonial and slow, rich with symbolic gestures. Mornings begin with sharply bitter coffee and newspapers that arrived via packet ships 3 weeks late. By midday, the drawing rooms are filled with voices deliberating trade policies, currency fluctuations, and naval positioning. And by evening, the grand dining halls flicker with candlelight as guests file in, each dressed to reflect their station. 7 courses pass in choreographed sequence, while discussions turn to land grants, smuggling concerns, or distant rebellions. Yet beneath all this control and pageantry was the backbone of their power. The Navy. These were not just fleets, they were expressions of empire, polished and disciplined to project dominance. When a royal vessel entered a colonial harbor, the world seemed to pause. Cannons saluted, uniformed guards stood straighter. Docks cleared. From balconies trimmed with gold leaf, the elite watched with composed satisfaction. The ship, its figurehead gleaming, its sails pristine, was both theater and threat. Naval drills followed, though these games often bore little relevance to evolving warfare. The lag of months in communication with Europe rendered strategies stale before they were even executed. Still, drills were held with unwavering devotion. Officers strutted with rehearsed authority, issuing commands loud enough for crowds to overhear. Cannons fired blanks into the sea. Ropes were coiled and uncoiled with deliberate precision. The illusion of preparedness mattered more than its reality. Underneath the spectacle lay contradictions too dense to ignore. Corruption, despite official disdain, seeped through the walls like rising damp. Fortresses were built to half height. Tax revenues went missing between ports and treasuries. Enslaved labor built the mansions in which discussions of morality and law took place. Trade monopolies and naval escorts were sold to the highest bidder, often quietly and beneath the cover of legitimacy. And then, in their diaries, we find flickers of something else in view, even longing. Some young colonial officers, full of ideals, felt a surprising pull toward the very freedom they were meant to eliminate. Pirates, for all their blood and plunder, answered to no chain of command. They rose by daring, not by inheritance. Their flags were black, not royal, but at least they flew them honestly. For a young lieutenant bound by protocol and politics, the life of a freebooter, glinting across the horizon, stirred uncomfortable admiration. These fantasies, of course, remained private. Duty demanded silence, and rebellion came in no form but a misplaced sigh or wistful glance out to sea. The governor's pen still scratched signatures. The banquets continued. Decrees were stamped. Tea was poured, and behind every act, every law passed, every shipment taxed was the understanding that the machinery must never stop turning. The empire survived not because it was just, but because it was orderly. And the illusion of permanence had to be maintained. Let us leave this world now with one final vision. The sun hangs low over a brilliant tropical bay. A breeze carries the mingled scents of salt and spice. From the hilltop estate, the governor surveys the anchorage below. Galleons, brigs, and sloops rock gently in the tide. The harbor bustles, and yet a hush lingers born from the awareness that power, though outwardly still, must be constantly managed. Inside, the governor receives a dispatch. A former pirate captain has accepted clemency and a title in exchange for his map. The cycle turns again, and yet, out beyond the reef, past where the charts end and the empire's grip thins, the ocean remains unchanged, vast and different, a place where no decree can settle the waves, and where, every so often, with our voyage nearly at its end, let us gently retreat from the tides of history we've just sailed. You have wandered through salt-slick decks and smoky galleys, met the gaze of a woman who defied the world in breeches and blade wandered, lost treasure coves shaded in mystery, and finally stood beneath the high ceilings of colonial opulence, where war was a chess game played with real lives. Slowly, we return back through the gales, through the scent of rum and gunpowder, back through time itself toward the still waters of sleep. History, for all its noise and thunder, often comes to us in whispers. It speaks not just through battles or edicts, but through the ordinary hands that stirred pots below deck, that penned the laws of colonies, or that buried the last of the gold before a ship burned down to its ribs. There is, beneath every era, a rhythm, a heartbeat of daily life. Whether you were swabbing the galley floor in darkness or overseeing shipments from a veranda, that rhythm echoed. It was the sound of survival, repetition, of humanity pressed against the vastness of the sea and the weight of empire. Tonight, we've traced those rhythms, not for thrill, but for quiet understanding. And now, in the comfort of your own bed, your eyes perhaps growing heavier, you may find comfort in knowing that beneath every storm-swept century, people simply tried to live, just as you do now. They loved, lost, worried, and in these shared experiences across wooden decks and colonial ballrooms, we are not so distant from them after all. So, let your thoughts drift now like a ship at dusk, its sails lowered, its lanterns dimmed, its crew asleep below. The waves rise and fall, steady as breath. The world slows. There is nothing you need to do now, only rest. Let the past fade gently into silence. Thank you for sailing with us. Sleep well. Now, the sea grows quieter. The sails flutter limp in the evening breeze. The wood of the ship creaks like a slumbering beast, and we leave behind the fire and fury of Anne Bonny, drifting instead toward legend, into the hazy borderlands where history dims and mystery begins. A liminal space, neither fully real nor fully myth. The air feels heavier here, full of stories half forgotten, of maps half burned, and of whispers that never quite faded. The sea, once alive with thunder and chase, now murmurs secrets, inviting us to follow. Tonight, we cast anchor in forgotten harbors and walk the overgrown paths of places not marked on official maps. Hidden pirate havens, secret islands and coves that whispered promises of safety, secrecy, and sometimes treasure. These were places known not by their names on charts, but by reputation passed in hushed tones from one captain to another, etched not in ink, but in memory and rumor. Whispers passed in the dark, over mugs of grog, places that appeared only when the sea cooperated and the moonlight hit the waves just right. Places that vanished just as easily, swallowed back into the deep. Let us begin where the waters run warm and blue through the Caribbean, a restless sea strewn with jagged reefs and uncounted islands. It was here, among the Lesser Antilles and the Bahamas, that the skeletons of old pirate republics took form. Nassau was the most infamous, but it was merely one among many. Small coves on islands like Tortuga, Ley, and the southern reaches of Hispaniola served as unofficial pirate enclaves. These places thrived not through law, but through shared necessity. There were no kings here, only captains, and there was no crown but the wind. The waves were lawless, and the anchor weighed only for need, not for command. These waters carried not just ships, but entire floating society spheres, fragile and fleeting. The havens were humble, even haphazard, often no more than a scattering of driftwood huts and canvas tents, tucked between the mangroves and hidden in folds of jungle green. Docks were uneven, lashed together from broken masts and storm-wrecked planks. Chickens roamed freely, pecking through the sand. Hammocks swayed between palms, some tattered, some dyed in brilliant color. Crates of pilfered goods sat half-buried under palm fronds. The air always smelled of salt and old rum, tinged with the faint odor of fish, tar, sweat, and fire smoke. At night, the stars were bright and unpolluted, and the campfires burned low, with laughter drifting like smoke into the dark. Songs with no name hummed low through the trees, half lullaby, half warning. You could walk among them and feel the hush of a world untethered, outside time, but freedom came with rules. Pirate codes sometimes inked, sometimes spoken governed the daily life of these enclaves. They varied from ship to ship, but most included democratic votes for leadership, shared spoils from raids, and strict penalties for betrayal or theft. It was a brutal fairness, but fairness nonetheless. Many pirates had once served on navy ships or merchant vessels, where orders were barked and abuse was common. Here, a man or a woman was valued by courage, not birth. You earned your place, often by bleeding for it. The code was ironclad and surprisingly egalitarian. Even wounded sailors or those no longer fit to fight often received compensation, cared for by the crew. Still, not all havens were in the West Indies. Some legends point across the world to the island of Madagascar, and in particular, to Alsace. Off Africa's east coast, this island became, for a time, a sanctuary for pirates who preyed on Indian Ocean trade routes, It is said that here, men like Captain Kidd, Olivier Lavisa, and Henry Every found rest. Some even built homes, raised families, and forged uneasy peace with local communities. The island became a melting pot of languages and elite beaches scattered with shipwrecked masts and barrels long since emptied. There were rumors of carved-out caves with dry floors, hidden behind waterfalls, where stolen riches were hidden away for safer days that never came. Beneath the canopy, the air buzzed with insects and smoke from cooking fires. Palm leaf roofs and coral stone huts dotted the landscape, and in the silence of night, the cry of fruit bats echoed over moonlit water. In the Indian Ocean, whispers also speak of the Persian Gulf, where ships laden with spice and pearls sometimes vanished without trace whether to reefs, storms, or cunning pirate crews. No one knew. Even the Red Sea, with its sacred coasts and dangerous shoals, bore tales of hidden inlets, where battered ships found momentary peace. These were not imagined places, but often carefully hidden alcoves, known only to those who had studied every rock, every tidal shift. Knowledge was as valuable as coin. And then, there are the whispered stories of lost treasure always, alluring, always just out of reach. Most of these tales are just that tales. Pirates rarely buried treasure in reality. Gold and jewels were often too risky to hide, and too tempting to leave untouched. The wealth of a pirate was more often found in goods, in sugar, in cloth, in spices, and tragically, at times, in people. Silver plate and bolts of silk, casks of molasses and barrels of tobacco. Things that could be traded, eaten, spent. The fantasy of the solitary treasure chest buried on a beach was largely a creation of fiction and folklore. Still, the myth of buried treasure persists, perhaps because it offers a kind of permanence in a world so full of decay, a glint of eternity in a life that rarely lasted long. Consider Captain William Kidd, hanged in 1701. Legend holds that he hid vast riches somewhere along the coast of North America on Gardner's Island. Though many have searched, none have truly succeeded. The earth keeps her secrets well. Old trees and shifting sands guard them better than any lock. Rumors continue to swirl of a rusted cutlass found in a root tangle, of strange depressions in the forest floor, of maps passed down through families and stained with age. Then there's the tale of Olivier Lavasa, the so-called buzzard. As he stood at the gallows, he reportedly tossed a cryptic document into the crowd, crying out, "Find my treasure, the who may understand it." That cipher has never been conclusively solved. Some believe it leads to hidden hoards in the Seychelles. Others think it was a final ruse. Yet the dream of his treasure continues to inspire treasure hunters, dreamers, and sleepless minds. The idea that somewhere, beneath jungle vine or coral stone, lies a box untouched by time. It's an idea that never quite leaves us. The notion persists, not because of likelihood, but because of longing. A deep, human wish for discovery, for something hidden that might still be found. But true riches, in the world of pirates, were often intangible. They were measured in the ability to live unruled, to vanish when pursued, to exist in the cracks of empire. These hidden harbors and outlaw enclaves, fragile, shifting, and frequently erased by time, remind us that another kind of world once existed. One where the horizon was both a promise and a warning. One where escape was not a direction, but a way of life. A slow defiance, lived on salted air and flickering flame. And so, tonight, we drift gently through those long-lost lands. Imagine yourself walking beneath tall palms as the moonlight scatters silver on wet leaves. The air thick with the scent of old wood, tobacco, and salt. Sand clings to your bare feet. Somewhere in the distance, you hear the faint creak of a mast swaying. No voices now, just the memory of laughter, faint and far away. A rustle in the trees. the soft thud of something dropped long ago. The ghosts of freedom walk here, barefoot and unburdened. Treasure or not, these hidden places endure, not in gold, but in story. In the quiet pulse of waves against ruined piers. In the way the sea seems to remember what we've forgotten. In the soft hush of salt wind moving through forgotten sails. In dreams of freedom sun-drenched and sea-worn, that still echo in the hush before sleep.